Hey, what's going on, ADPI Nation? This is your host, Kevin Brenner, and we have another incredible guest, like we do each and every week. But this one is super interesting. If you are in the short-term rental game, maybe you're an active listener of the podcast who's also in our military short-term rental academy and cohort. Maybe you're just a short-term rental fan and you're on the sidelines waiting to get in, or maybe you have a large portfolio of short-term rentals already and you just wish there was someone that you can list to get more military clients. Well, this is the podcast for you, because my guest today, Alex Tessier, she found that need that was out there, and she, rather than complain about it, she created a solution. And we're going to talk about what that is, where it is in the process, and what you need to do if you have a short-term rental or you want to get into the short-term rental game, what you need to do to comply from a compliance standpoint to be listed through DTS. And so your place can be found through billets and DTS. And so the whole conversation is going to be fun. But Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
So before we jump into all of that exciting stuff, let's talk about your military background and kind of what made you go the way of short-term rentals and just real estate in general.
Sure. I enlisted back in 2005. And my transition or my commission is actually what led me into short-term rentals. So beginning of 2021, I went and completed OTS, asked if I could go ahead and get orders ASAP to AMOC. And they said, sure, go ahead. Well, about that time, my husband was fired. Not wanting to wear the mask. Big disagreement there. Obviously, I was on board with it, so it worked out. Kids were still kind of doing the whole back and forth virtual thing. And we said, let's just all go to AMOC. I asked my commander, he approved it. And last minute we said, well, how are we going to supplement income? And we, with 2 weeks to leaving, decided to load everything up in our attic, essentially, and stage our house as an Airbnb. And that was terrifying because my husband and I are trying to kind of manage it as I'm going through the aircraft maintenance officer course for 4 months.
Wow.
And it worked out really well. We made pretty decent money on it, learned a lot along the way. And we thought, this is really great. And I found out that some of my classmates were staying at what's essentially a crash pad, and asked them how they liked that. And how did they find it? How did that work? And that kind of led to us going, okay, well, my family's living kind of in a hotel on base and it's not great. The Air Force does the best it can, but we've all stayed in a base lodging and know that there's a lot to be desired sometimes.
Yeah, that's a nice way of saying it. There's a lot to be desired sometimes.
Right. So found out about the crash pad thing and said, well, how do you find it? And they said, well, it's all word of mouth. And so I started talking to some other folks about it. And they said, yeah, it's actually really difficult because if you want to take your family from crash pad to crash pad, you just kind of have to know about them. There's no marketplace for them. Tossed the idea around some and decided to essentially make an Airbnb for military. And our, step one in that was figuring out what do you have to do for people to be able to book, because obviously there's Airbnb, people were booking them. Unfortunately, a lot of them were not getting reimbursed. So we went and did a lot of research before we built this. But yeah, that's water coming under the hotel door was kind of what it's like, all right, we can do better than this.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit. Crash pad, because I've heard this term in multiple different ways. So to me, from being in the Air Force, the crash pad was where the pilots would go during their training, and it would be a house outside of like Vance Air Force Base, where heavy training is, and it would be like, or whatever training is. What's the one in Enid, Oklahoma? It's not Vance; it's the other one. Whatever.
I honestly have
to top my head. There's a training base out there, the KC-135. My brother was a KC-135 pilot, so he told me all of this stuff. But to me, the crash pad was like, hey, he lived in Oklahoma City, but he would have to go up to Enid all the time to go and train. So he would, he had his house in Oklahoma City with his family. He would leave that. He would go and rent by the room someone's house. And that was quote unquote the crash pad. Now, the other term of crash pad I've heard is like specifically in the short-term rental industry where you're marketing, how like people will market midterm rentals to like travel nurses. Well, you're marketing to flight attendants. And you'll put a bunch of bunk beds in a space and be like, hey, this is flight attendants. This is the crash pad kind of a thing, right? But when you say crash pad, Alex, what does that mean to you? And maybe what does that help our guests excuse me, help our listeners relate a little more.
Yeah. So the house that my classmates were staying at really was functioning like a crash pad. It was this great house that has a bunch of extra amenities, a bunch of rooms, a bunch of bathrooms. They all stayed in it, each of them renting their own room. And that's actually, so we get a lot of questions about how do you expect short-term rentals to even compete with Airbnb if we have to stay at the government rate? Because of course that's one of the requirements, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you would compete, one of the ways is to run it more like a crash pad and rent out each room, or more like a hotel. And we have requirements that you have to meet so that we ensure the safety of the military member, but also give the host the opportunity to make a little bit more money. But on billets, you don't have to list it by the room. You can list the whole house. We stayed, my family and I stayed in a short-term rental that was, it was short-term rental, right? Quote unquote. And we had the whole house to ourselves, and we rented as a midterm rental for 4 months. So more or less. So you'll have that opportunity because, like I said, we're building it around whatever the requirements are for your area, and it'll absolutely be up to the host to pay attention to what works for their area. But yeah, when you say crash pad, that's exactly how I meant it. Was in the traditional sense of like pilots. The only difference, of course, was that the officers staying there weren't pilots.
Right. They're just
a bunch of
whatever.
maintenance officers.
Yeah, a bunch of maintenance officers, whoever. They're TDY, and they need a place to crash. So, okay, all right. So putting that baseline down, that's I think super helpful for people to understand. So you're staying there. You pack up your family, like you have kind of this traumatic experience with your husband losing his job, and you're just like, okay, well, there goes half of our income. What are we gonna do? And
Right.
and we pack up, and I got to go to training. And what do you say? This is a 4-month program.
Yep.
So you were gone for 4 months, and you list your space on Airbnb, your house, which was your primary house, right?
It's my primary home. Yep. They slept in our beds.
Yeah. So like you're listing this, you got strangers in your bed, like the whole thing, like everything that people freak out about with getting a short-term rental underway. What was that process like? And for you, like, how did you make it work in such a short amount of time? Was it strictly just necessity based, or was it like, hey, listen, we're doing this and we're going to just try it out? Like, what was that like?
So we've been talking about real estate for a long time. It was a dream of my dad's that he kind of passed down to me. I don't think my dad ever really got too into it, but it was just something that, my parents had talked a lot about the benefits of real estate. I knew we had some benefits. I wasn't super familiar with them, unfortunately. I did use my VA loan for the first time in 2019 to buy that primary residence. Mm-hmm. And so my husband and I just got to talking about it and said, if it doesn't work, we'll close it down. We haven't lost anything at that point, and at least the mortgage will be paid. And so our goal was not to make a ton of money off of it. It was just to cover the mortgage. Because I'm very fortunate that I am Guard, so I have a great job outside of the military that does the paycheck matching.
Oh, okay.
So some companies do that, and so that was a huge benefit. But yeah, I don't think we could have made it without having listed on Airbnb. And it was a snap decision. In like 24 hours, we decided to do it, and we thought it was going to be our forever home. So it's a 3,000 square foot home that we were like, okay, we're going to actually put photos up for the first time. Because, you move all the time in the military. If you're familiar with this, maybe you didn't put photos up, you didn't bother to decorate, you didn't paint. So we were finally doing all those things.
With like 2 weeks, you're like painting and there's like brushes everywhere and you're packing and someone else is moving and the trucks are everywhere. Yeah, it's a whole nightmare.
The first guest, as they rolled up, we were still shoving stuff in the garage and we're like, we're really sorry.
You're meeting there and like you have like the door is like the stuff is like falling out of the closet door and you're just like jamming it shut. Don't open that door. That's an owner's closet. Just don't open it.
Yes. Yeah, but they were super cool about it. I was like, you can check in. It was just really weird watching him go like take his shoes off and lay on my couch.
Yeah, well, make yourself at home. I guess that's part of the part of the gig. All right, so that's interesting. So I mean, results of this, were you able to cover down on your mortgage for the 4 months that you were away?
It covered our mortgage, all of the utilities, all of the, spectrum and internet and all that jazz that we had. And then it afforded us enough that we're like, well, people gave us some feedback and says it doesn't feel very homey because we'd hidden everything.
Mm-hmm.
All we left was like beds and dressers. And so we went out and bought some, I call it like disposable, but it's not obviously, some carpets or rugs, rugs and some paintings and some stuff just to make it feel a little bit higher.
It's a little decor.
Quality.
Yeah.
Yep. And actually that allowed us to increase our nightly rate sufficient that we're like, let's buy a second house. So wow. We're up to three rentals. The one in Alabama that was our original primary home, we converted to a long-term because it was a little bit much to manage it that far away. We do have 2 more short-terms that are out of state from where we're at now, but it's still only like a 3-hour drive. And then we have a lot of help in that area. So
that's great. So you kind of got your feet wet in the industry a little bit, which is really helpful because that's going to give you, like you mentioned earlier, Alex, it gives you the insight. So right. For folks listening to this podcast who are like still trying to get into real estate and they don't know what strategy to do and all of this stuff, I think a big lesson to take away is, just try something. Just try something and, trust your numbers. Like I always say, trust your numbers. Don't get emotional about it. If your numbers are good and solid and you have the education behind you, you're gonna be okay. There's gonna be bumps and bruises. There always is. No, there's no perfect investment out there. Just stuff happens, especially in real estate. To be able to go and take that risk that you guys did and kind of born out of necessity, a little bit out of a traumatic experience, but mostly just like, hey, we're gonna do this. We're going to try it. We've been talking about it forever. We're going to, we're just going to try it and we'll see and we can always take it off. If it doesn't perform and no one stays there, all right, we'll just not list it. I mean, like not a big deal. Honestly, it's still our house.
We handled the conversion for the long-term the same way. We said, do we sell it or do we list it long-term? And we listed it for a long-term rental and said, well, we're going to list it at what we think is competitive around here and see what happens. And we kind of went into it expecting you have to possibly lower the price. And we had applicants right away and chose this great family that's in there now. And it met their needs, met our needs. And we were really kind of surprised that it rented as well as it did. And yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah.
Same thing. Just test it out.
Just test it out. So let's transition this conversation into something very interesting. And that's, you kind of touched on it earlier, what billets is. So let's rewind and let's just say I have never heard of billets. I don't know anything about it. I don't even know, from when I was active duty, obviously when I was going TDY all the time, well, I would go on DTS. Well, the first thing actually that I would do is I would go and call the base lodging where I had to go and be like, come on, non-availability letter. Come on, non-availability letter. Come on, non-A letter. Right. Like, because I really did not want to stay in those hotels. They're so crappy. They're so bad. Yes, they're so bad. So I have to assume, and we'll talk about this, but actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's just talk about billets. What is billets?
So the simplest way to describe it is if you're familiar with Airbnb or VRBO, we are that for the military. But essentially, we are a short-term rental platform. We connect hosts that are willing to meet the government requirements to military members who don't want to stay off base. Or on base, excuse me.
So simple enough. So now let's walk me through the process here as I remember going TDY as much as I used to. But, first thing, you get the orders and you do the whole thing and you're in DTS and you got to figure out, okay, where you get your flights and all of that. Then you got to figure out, where am I going to stay? Like, what does this look like? You call base lodging and they say, oh, guess what? There's no space available. And I'm like, yes. Now what?
So there's actually a couple things you should know. One of the things is that so long as your commander's okay with it, put that caveat out there. The joint travel regulation that all of our branches go by says that you can stay off base without a non-availability letter.
Oh, wow.
But that if you choose to do so, you can only be reimbursed up to the amount that it would have cost to stay on base.
Okay. I see.
So, for example, the base rate at Shepherd Air Force Base, Wichita Falls is, I think it's $86 a night right now. So my rental is listed at $85 a night. I don't charge a cleaning fee because that's a requirement with billets and the JTR. So no additional fees because we want our airmen to get reimbursed the full amount. The only way we might charge something is with anything if there's additional cleaning or damage. And that's notated on our website to our guests, so they know if you damage something, if there's extra cleaning because you opt to bring a pet and we're pet friendly, then we're going to charge you that cleaning fee. But we're going to reach out and ask you, do you want it on your GTC or on your personal credit card? And then, again, following the same check-in, check-out instructions as local hotel might agree to. So how would you find us? We're working to get into DTS right now. We're competing for that. It's a highly competitive process. There's a lot of things that a typical home wouldn't do that a hotel already has in place because it's a public lodging facility. But we have that information available upon request for hosts that are interested in doing it. We've had a couple initiate the process and just not be willing to follow through just yet. But again, it can seem very daunting, but Billets is there the whole way through to help you out to make sure that you have what you need and know how to comply and don't get overwhelmed by it. But yeah, so your question, you asked, how would they find us? So the first thing is when you go into DTS and you go to book, one of the options, of course, like I mentioned, is you can choose other lodging. And at that point, you're just going to go, you can call us if you need help with this process. I haven't done it in about 6 months, but we'll walk you through it in DTS, making sure that you've got everything documented the way you need to. And essentially, you're just going to say that you're choosing other lodging. You're going to go to the billets.org, where we bought the billets.com. You'll be able to access this there soon as well. And you're going to put in whether you're an airman or an officer, because your pay rate varies, and we want to make sure that we don't overcharge you. You're going to put whether you have a non-availability letter or not, or if you're on leisure travel. And then you're going to let us know whether it's going to be just a member, if you want to bring your family, and whether or not you're going to have any pets. And based on that, you're going to get your search results, and your pricing is going to be based entirely on the joint travel regulation. So if you would have qualified for per diem rate at $98 a night, then that's what you're going to be charged. If you would have had to stay on base normally, then we're going to charge you that $85. Because again, we want our hosts to, it's still business, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to do it the same way the hotel would, but we also want to make sure that our airmen military members all get reimbursed the way they're supposed to.
Yeah. So, and I have so many thoughts just kind of swirling around my head right now with this. The first one being like, if you guys can get into DTS, that would be huge because that's where everyone looks, and then it could just be a link to Billets and they fill out their thing and then do that. But I can totally understand that's an extremely competitive contract filled with red tape and bureaucracy just to even talk to the right person. Ask me how I know.
So we're fortunate we've talked to the right people. The next step really is so if you think of Billets like a Hampton Inn, mm-hmm. right? So not every Hampton Inn is in DTS as an option. So not every home is going to be in DTS as an option. So that means though we have to find the right homes to get us into DTS to actually be competitive. And there's definitely a need. We know that the Air Force specifically is closing down 1,000+ rooms across the U.S. I think in the next year.
Like 1,000 rooms in the base hotels, you mean?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Just shutting them down because they're like sucky and in a state of disrepair.
Well, so I think it was 2018, they switched from the federal government funding it to whatever they earn funds it, mm-hmm. and they couldn't keep up because people the rate that they were able to charge and then the number of people that they're actually getting in, it just wasn't meeting the needs. And so they aren't updating, they aren't keeping it up, which of course results in even fewer people booking. And what the Army did was they privatized. And so you can go on, what was it, Fort Bragg, maybe, I think I called the other day, and they have a Hampton Inn on base.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So when I was stationed at Hunter Army Airfield and Fort Stewart, they had like legit hotels, and it was privatized.
Right. At this time, the Air Force hasn't opted to do that. The Navy and the Marines don't have any plan to do that. And so there's going to be a gap. And so like Tinker just shut theirs, there's a gap there. And so we're actually looking for homes around Oklahoma City, Tinker Air Force Base that are interested because we know we've got trainees there. We know we've got folks going to UI there.
100%.
Where are they staying?
Yeah, Tinker's a huge base for Air Force. Okay, so that's super interesting. So, we kind of talked about billets here. I'm curious on the host side of things. I'm a short-term rental host, right? Mm-hmm. In the Washington, D.C. area. like you mentioned earlier, it's a business. If I'm objectively looking at billets and I'm like, okay, well, I'm already listed on Airbnb, I'm already listed on VRBO, maybe I got booking.com, but obviously the more listing services you can be on, the more eyeballs that your listing can get. And it's marketing, like from my side of the coin, it's my marketing fee. And of course I pay Airbnb, what, 14%, and VRBO comes out to like 15%. And yeah, it's like that's a lot of money. But they're covering down on my marketing. They're literally doing my customer acquisition if we used regular business terms, right? So kind of important. From the standpoint of like compliance and everything, what does a host like me have to do to even get on billets? Because you mentioned so many different, I don't want to call them hoops to jump through or anything like that, but Airbnb, for example, has made it pretty simple to list your Airbnb. They've got that process down, like, hey, you create your listing, snap some photos, do this, that, the other, and you're pretty good to go. The government really doesn't get involved unless there's local ordinance and regulation on actually just having any short-term rental. So what is it like, for you navigating that process and for hosts to navigate that process?
I haven't had negative feedback on actually listing yet. So the biggest thing that we run into is there's not enough upfront information, and we're actually working to improve that. Because obviously we're still small enough that I'm able to take all that feedback, and we want the customer to have something that they enjoy. And customer isn't just the guest, right? That's also the host. So we're taking all the feedback that we can. And we're actually getting ready to launch a whole new website March 1st.
And that's exciting. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. I'm stoked. And I'll talk about that a little more later if you give me an opportunity. But so ours is a 6 or 7 step process, very similar to Airbnb. The first thing that's going to do is it's going to ask you, what kind of listing do you have? So do you have a home, an apartment, whatever? Do you want to rent the whole home? Do you want to rent individual rooms? But then the very second step is that government compliance piece. Do you have a FEMA ID? And this actually is a bit of a hoop for a lot of people, and not because it's actually difficult, but because people look at it and go, oh, I have to go to another website. So we're working to improve that on this new website to make it just a little bit simpler, smoother, more streamlined. But what you'll do is you have to have, if you've got more than 3 stories in your house, 3 stories or more, then you have to have a sprinkler system. Well, that's usually like that's usually like a condo though, right? That's usually some sort of living space that's already designed for that. So most of them already have some sort of a sprinkler system in them.
But if you have like a 3-story townhome, for example.
Right. So
yeah.
There are stipulations on the government website that kind of outline when you have to have that sprinkler system and what it needs to look like. So some places are grandfathered in if they were built before a certain time.
Sure.
But yeah, so if you have a 3-story townhome, you would have to have some sort of, like, it was built this year, you'd have to have some sort of a sprinkler system built in. Wow. So yeah, that can be a barrier to entry for some folks.
Yeah, sounds like it.
most homes aren't 3 stories plus.
That's true. Most are 2 or 1, but yeah.
Right. So, and then the other thing that you would need is if you are listing each individual room would have to have a hardwired smoke detector.
Okay.
Not battery operated. It has to be hardwired. Now, if you're going to rent out the whole house and you have no intention of going back and doing each individual room, then it's just got to be the smoke detector, I think, in the hallways around the bedrooms and in the kitchen. They still have to be hardwired, but you don't need, if you got an 8-bed, 8-bath, you don't need 12 smoke detectors. You need a couple. So a lot of people, they look at that and they go, I have to go pay somebody to do that. You can get a 6-pack at Home Depot and then just install them per your local state regulation.
Yeah.
It's not as I did all mine. So
not as difficult as one may think. What are some other things that hosts might have to look out for?
Yeah. So the next thing specifically you have to have, again, this is, if you rent each room, then you have to have these things. So you have to have the digital alarm clock. You have to have an iron and ironing board of all things. But, we send folks to school. So when they're there in their blues or their dress uniform, they need to have the right tools to take care of it. And obviously they're not going to carry an ironing board with them. So that one kind of makes sense when you look at it from that perspective. A full-length mirror, got to make sure that you're dressed right in your uniform. And central air was the other one. And that's because the federal regulation requires it. So I've had a couple of folks ask, hey, I'm in a really mild climate. Do I have to have that? And on those, we really reach out to the local state government to see what their requirements are for local hotels.
Mhm.
and we try to make sure that we match that.
Yeah.
So
So, okay, so there's a lot of different things here. Like if you're renting by the room or you're not renting by the room, this is different. And really just to clarify, you can of course, you don't have to meet all of these stipulations, just list on Airbnb, but this is to list um this is to get military clients pretty much from the
correct.
host perspective. Like this is to
And
list
that,
with you
so
guys, yeah, because that's
so the
important.
biggest right. So actually, the other thing that we're doing with the new website, it's still going to be called Billets, but you're going to have the option to list just like you would on Airbnb.
Hmm.
And essentially, is if you want your military clientele, you're going to also have that military badge that says, "Hey, these guys are approved. They're meeting all the JTR requirements." And then there's also going to be that extra DTS badge, right? So the same way that you have Airbnb Superhost,
Hmm.
we're going to have a military badge so that when you book, you get the list of military approved homes, so that we ensure that everybody's getting reimbursed. But hosts have that opportunity without having to go a bunch of different places to bring in the income that they're looking to make.
Okay. So yeah, this is kind of cool. So that's the host perspective. From the, like you said, there's two sets of customers. There's the hosts and then there's the guests, right? Or
Right.
the traveler or whatever you want to call them.
Mm-hmm.
From that side of the house, what do they need to look out for? Because like you said, if your commander approves, you actually don't need a non-availability letter, but you cannot spend more than the daily rate on your lodging. So for example, pre-billets, someone, let's say they get a non-availability letter, whatever,
Right.
or they don't, let's say they don't, and they can only
Okay.
spend up to $99 a night. That's their per
Mm-hmm.
diem. That's on their thing. Well, they want to go get an Airbnb, and they're like, the cheapest Airbnb is $150 a night. That person is either going to have to suck it up and stay in the hotel or
Mm-hmm.
find a different lodging. Otherwise, they're going to be paying out of pocket. And obviously,
Well,
you don't want that, right?
there's actually even more risk with booking with Airbnb because they don't have the FEMA code. Most of them, I'm not going to say none of them, but most of them don't have a FEMA code because it's not a requirement. Like you said, anybody can list a home. And then their documents aren't compliant. They may or may not charge you tax, even though there are some states that when you're on military official travel, you are tax exempt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons that originally we said all of the hosts are going to be required to have these things, because we don't want our military members to have to guess at all. And so,
Sure.
again, one of the things that we're building in is when you come in and you say I'm on official orders, if our hosts don't meet the requirements, they won't show up to the military members. But we'll constantly be giving hosts an opportunity to like, hey, do you want to reach this market? Here's what you need to do.
Yeah.
So for our guest side of things, look, you get a full kitchen, a backyard, usually all the amenities that you would get of an Airbnb. We have this great condo right now out at Redstone Arsenal, which is Huntsville, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got like I said, it's a condo. It's a 2-bed, 2-bath, great space. And it's got pool access and playground and all sorts of cool stuff. A couple of our homes, you can rent the whole house out, and it's like an 8-bed, 3-bath, and it's 5 minutes to base, and it's got a huge backyard, barbecue grill. Some of them have saunas and hot tubs. Again, they're still just vacation rentals that somebody else said, hey, I'd like to also support my military.
Yeah. So
at the same rate that you'd pay on base.
Yeah, the same rate that you pay on base. Now, is it a good deal for hosts, or does that just vary?
So it varies, right? The biggest thing is if you're in the military, like, what do we do with our first-term airmen when they go buy a brand new car at 22% interest?
Yeah, exactly.
And they can't make the payment. We call their first shirt and we're like, hey, they're not making their payment. Now, the first shirt will usually end up helping them get out from under whatever that loan was, right? And help them do the right thing. But they hold them accountable. And so the nice thing is most of our military, they're on official travel. They're not looking to get into any trouble. Every person that I've had stay with me that's been military, my house, I swear they've made it better.
They're like adding decor and like, oh wow,
yeah.
dishwasher.
I had one guy, he wrote me and he said, hey, can I completely just move the furniture since I'm here for 2 months? Do you mind? And I said, I don't mind. If I like it, I'll leave it. And so he said, and then he said, can I have a dresser? I said, sure, I'll go grab a dresser. So I went and grabbed a dresser for him. and left it inside for him. And when I came back, he'd completely moved everything around, and I liked it so much. It looked so good, we left it.
So you got some free design tips from from one of your guys.
It was really cool.
That's awesome. It's funny you brought up the airman getting the car at 22%. I was watching Parks and Rec the other day, and Andy Dwyer is like, I just bought a motorcycle, 12% interest, pretty much the highest you can get. He's very proud of himself. I just thought of that.
We do that, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. So Alex, this is really cool. So yeah, I mean, for guests out there, there's an opportunity. I mean, the big thing here is, this is the market who's traveling TDY. And sometimes these TDYs are long. So, the way I'm thinking about it from a host perspective, if you have to charge, say it's, I don't know, let's say it's $100 for math's sake, say it's $100 a night that you have to charge because that's the per diem and whatever,
right?
Well, guess what? If that person is staying for 3 months, that's
and they're as good as my guest was.
Yeah, and they're great guests, and all of this. I mean, that's some significant income that you might have. Especially if your host is in a seasonal place, like if you have a seasonal short-term rental that you're I don't know, you're kind of like up somewhere where it's colder in the winter, but you might be near a military base. And go on.
There are a couple of benefits to that, right? Like you pointed out. So if they're there for 3 months or 4 months, like I was, first of all, your cleaning fee is different. I went ahead and for my short-term rentals outside the base, I have somebody go in and kind of do a light clean once a week as a part of it. But I found somebody who was willing to work with me and have that steady income versus being on call to do random turnovers. And so again, as long as you know what you're doing as a business and you negotiate that pricing, it's extremely beneficial because now I'm not paying $250 every 3 days for a turnover. I'm paying, I think it was around $400 for once a week. They'd go in and, like for me, they'd change the sheets, change the linens, make sure that there's no dishes stacking up in the sink, and vacuum because we're pet friendly. So that was really important. And then when they needed to do a turnover, it was already prepped and ready to go and kind of a part of what they were doing anyway. So fewer turnover fees. Again, you've got great guests typically. I had a couple guests have parties. They called and asked first and said, hey, can we do this? It was really low key get together. They cleaned up after themselves. And then, like you said, with the seasonal, militaries always have to train. Yep. They always have to train. So
you can really fill your occupancy. That's kind of, if you're in February and January, I mean, my occupancy in the Northern Virginia market, I mean, this is the lowest of the low season. And right now we're doing a full redesign. I just spent $3,000 yesterday on new furniture for one of the listings. And we got, it's all getting shipped. We got the people, the maintenance people are standing by to receive it and assemble it and set it up. And we got the whole thing figured out. But we're doing that because it's our low season, and we're going to make it better for the upcoming season. But if there was an opportunity to go and say like, hey, instead of, if you have it all ready to go, and normally you see 30% occupancy in January and February, but you can go and get someone staying TDY for 2 months.
Right.
I'll take that revenue.
Right. Yeah. So again, you talk about the potential revenue. I had a gentleman stay. It was we were just starting, and we were looking at it from the perspective of it's better to have somebody in there than nobody in there and be paying the mortgage ourselves. Again, brand spanking new. And this guy reached out and said, "Hey, I want to bring my whole family, but I'll be on visiting airmen pricing, right? Mm-hmm. So on base, it would have been $70 a night." And we looked at that and said, "Can we swing that?" It comes out to about $2,100 a month. For 4 months, guaranteed income, right? Brand new, trying to get our feet off the ground. And that for us, it made sense. We paid a low enough price on our mortgage and all of our utilities that it just made sense for us. So knowing your business, but then again, being able to say that my occupancy was 100% for 4 months, that was really nice.
Yeah. You have that guaranteed thing going. So that's pretty cool. This has been a really great discussion, Alex. And there's definitely an opportunity. There's definitely a market, and for military guests out there, who are looking for another option. Because there's a need.
There is.
When when can the listeners of this podcast expect more, more from Billets, as far as, maybe I know you have some things worked out with DTS and you're working with this and you're working with that. Like, what's the progression look like?
So second week of March, our new web developer is supposed to launch our new website. And the reason that's important is because it's going to expand our functionality quite a bit. And so one of the things that we got feedback on was our pricing functionality. And everybody said, I can't just charge $85 a night. And we took a look at it and we realized that our pricing algorithm wasn't working quite right. And the person that we had was kind of limited, unfortunately. So we got this new person, Coast Guard, so a fellow military member, who came in and said, I really think I can help you out. Let's take this up a notch. And so not only are we going to have improved pricing functionality, so of course you still have to charge whatever the local base rate is, but we fixed our algorithm. So now, for example, Anchorage, Alaska, the per diem rate, if you have that non-availability letter, is $225 a night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we fixed that. So now if you are listing in Anchorage, it's going to take a look at your zip code for your listing, and it's going to base your per diem rate that you're allowed to charge on your zip code. So that's been fixed. I'm looking at my notes real quick. Calendar sync, so that you can, if you want to list with VRBO, Airbnb, there's no issue there. It'll automatically sync. We're adding our intro videos and some how-to setup for listings and for guests. Like you said, some key pointers to look for. Mm-hmm. A blog page that really talks and breaks down the benefits.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
Yep. And then we're also going to have an investors page. So if you're interested in investing with Billets and seeing what we've got going on, you'll be able to log in and look at our sales specifically, and some of our occupancy and how we're doing and where we think we're going. So all of that should be available the second week in March.
That's super cool.
So
I love that.
It's right around the corner.
It's right around the corner. Yeah.
And then as far as, we have currently 27 listings. We're in 7 states, but we support, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different bases right now. Yep. Perfect. And then we actually have 26 pending listings, and those are in 10 more different states.
Wow. So you're really seeing a lot of growth and expansion just in the idea alone. Yep. And do you find that a lot of these the hosts that you work with, are they military themselves, or are they just people that are like, hey, this is a good idea and I want to take advantage of this market base?
So the coolest thing that's happened since we've launched, people complain about big corporations and taking all the money, and so the Army privatizing, and it's great because we've got lodging for our folks, but the really cool thing about Billets is that the majority of our hosts are either currently military, active duty, guard, or veterans. So it's awesome. Pretty exciting because you get to propel your fellow military member forward by using this service. So you get something better out of it, and your host's life improves by you using it.
Yeah, it's a win-win. I totally love it. Awesome, Alex. Well, we are coming to that point in the podcast where we're running out of time. And I got to take you into the bonus round. So they're the same 4 questions that I ask each and every guest on the Active Duty Passive Income podcast. Are you ready?
As I'm going to be.
That's the spirit. Question number 1, what book or software has really helped you crush it lately?
So like I mentioned, we are launching that new website and WordPress. I learned a lot about WordPress recently. And that resulted in us launching like 3 more websites in the next month that are completely unrelated, but you'll hear more about them elsewhere. So WordPress, and then I love Ayn Rand. I think she's brilliant, and her philosophies. So Atlas Shrugged, Anthem's kind of scary.
Yeah, a little bit.
What's the other one? The Fountainhead. I think those are great books, and she does such a great job of articulating her philosophies. So.
Yeah, and there's a podcast that I listen to called Throughline on NPR. It's kind of like a history podcast, and they do a deep dive on Ayn Rand. It's I think you'll really like it. Super, super awesome. Kind of the history of her thinking coming out of the Soviet Union and everything, and it's pretty cool, and why she was so successful as an author. Give that one a listen.
I will.
Shameless plug to Throughline. Their podcast gets like 1 billion listens a month. So what's one more? Next question for you: who's your biggest hero and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. So a couple years ago, I might have said something entirely different. I think we each have to be the hero in our own story. And that kind of goes back to the Ayn Rand philosophy. And I think you just have to work hard, and you can learn a lot from the people around you. But I really think we each have to be our own hero. So um, without being
Yeah.
too arrogant, I'm the hero of my own story right now.
No, yeah. Hey, listen, you're the protagonist of your own book. You're the hero of your own story. It's all the same thing. But understanding that gives you the confidence to go after and do something great. And I
Yeah.
think that's like such an understated theory in our society that we all kind of have to just climb the corporate ladder one step at a time. And you could do
Right.
that, and you could be doing something great, but you don't have to do that. And I learned that a long time ago. Life is about making an impact in
Well,
those
and
that
I
you
think you have
care
to be
about.
careful, right? You might be the hero of your own story, but that doesn't mean that you're stepping on people, right? That's what the
Mhm.
villain does.
Yeah.
So it's 100% about humility and learning from the people around you, but taking that in and taking responsibility for your impact. It's not altruism. If
Mhm.
you know anything about Ayn Rand, you know it's not about altruism. It's about understanding that if I wouldn't want it done to me, I can't turn around and do that to somebody else, and just doing the best I can to be the best version of myself.
Exactly. I love that. Question number 3, lightening it up a little bit. What do you like to do for fun?
I love staying busy. So
Oh God, no!
that's
I know you're not allowed to talk about busy or work. Their fun
well,
exists, and I want to know what Alex likes to do for fun.
I love baking with my kids.
Boom, bacon with your
Yeah,
kids. That counts.
they love it. It's a
Ah,
blast, and they learn so much from it. And a couple years ago, the mess from it would have driven me insane, and now it's like cleaning up afterwards is part of the fun because I know how much fun they had.
yeah, that's
So
awesome. What's your go-to baked good item with the kiddos?
right now it's ginger snaps. My husband loves them.
Ooh,
So I, like
ginger
every other
snaps.
day I'm baking a fresh batch, but we do our own bread.
Oh, okay.
He's from Cuba, so there's a lot of Cuban foods that I try out.
Ooh, fun.
And he's a great critic. He tells me how much it doesn't taste like home, but keep working on it. No, I'm
There you go.
kidding. He's very supportive, and he loves the way I bake for him. So I shouldn't do that.
It's incredible. All right, question number 4 here for you. You kind of shared a lot about short-term rentals and kind of the process.
Hmm.
And usually I ask people for like, hey, what's 3 nuggets of wisdom that you can share about whatever we just talked about? But I kind of want to just for you because there's a very specific kind of podcast and episode. What can you just summarize like the 3 top benefits for hosts and or guests out there using the billet system just to put a pin in this conversation as you grow the company?
Sure. You might be tempted to go do this yourself or with another website. We've already done it all for you. The hardest part for you is going to that other website to do the FEMA ID. And we're working on making that even more streamlined. So we've already got it all set up for you. No questions about how to get compliant. We're going to walk you through it. Military members, we've set it up for you. There's no question that we're compliant. And so you don't have to go ask Airbnb or VRBO or whomever else and say, hey, do you mind getting me this receipt the right way? Or, hey, do you have these things in place? We've already done it.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, you have the benefit of now you're in a short-term rental. So you have that full kitchen, all the amenities of home. You can potentially bring your family or your pet. A lot of places are pet friendly. You're still within 5 to 20 minutes of the base. And really you're helping one another out because for every host who you support, it's potentially another military member who's using that to their benefit. And it means that they're going to turn around and make sure that you have more options. So when you go to PCS, if you got a home listed, you've got another opportunity out there because you're supporting billets.
Yeah, I love that. That is an incredible summary of this, and you're new, but you're scaling, and you're talking to the right people, and you're on the right podcast. Our listeners out there, they want to get in touch with you, whether to ask you questions, whether to inquire about being a host for you and helping you grow, whether to think about investing alongside you. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so our website is thebillets.org. And you can email me directly at customer service@thebillets.org.
Boom. There you go. Customer service at thebillets.org. You'll get in touch with Alex directly. Alex, this has been so much fun. I'm really excited to see this take off for you because there's such a need out there. And I really think you're answering the mail and you're doing a great service for our military members. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk to you next time.
Yes, sir.